Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and we have something incredible to take a look at today. Potentially one of the most requested reviews of my channel's history. And over the last few weeks, I don't know that there's a day that's gone by that I didn't have someone either commenting or messaging me asking me to review this figure. We have the Artic Figures V-Rex. This is obviously a super articulated figure, as all of the Artic figures usually are, and it looks incredible. It really does, and it's so cool to finally have such a beautiful, very screen accurate interpretation of a V-Rex with so much articulation. And Artic Figures absolutely knocked this out of the park. You can actually still order this right now. I believe there's a pre-order up on the Artic Figures Etsy shop where you can get a pre-order in for this, and you can purchase it painted or unpainted. This is the painted version by Artic Figures. I know a lot of the time when I get Artic Figures stuff here on my channel, I usually paint it myself, whereas this time we have the pleasure of actually checking out the version that you would, actually receive painted by Artic Figures, and it looks phenomenal. I think Artic Figures did a great job on, of course, the sculpt, especially when it comes to the screen accuracy, but also the paint. The paint looks great on this. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at it right now. So, starting up here at the head sculpt of the V-Rex, you can get a really good look here, really good idea of just how screen accurate it is. Like, it absolutely looks exactly as the V-Rex looks. Artic Figures did a great job as far as capturing the overall skull shape and just the general appearance to the V-Rex, including its skin texture. The skin texture looks really nice as you move through the head here of the V-Rex. You've got the nostrils sculpted out up here at the tip of the snout. You also have those interlocking teeth, which the V-Rex is obviously known for, and they do close the jaw closes very nicely. You can see the teeth interlock perfectly. And then, of course, we have an articulated jaw, as you always have when it comes to Artic Figures releases. And you can see that we've got the skin stretching here, of course, on the side of the mouth. That's sculpted very nicely. And you can also see that the inside of the mouth in general is incredible. Look at how gorgeous that is. First of all, look, if you look back there in the back, you can actually see the throat itself of the V-Rex, which is insane, but you can see that the detailing in general through the inside of the mouth is absolutely incredible. Probably some of the absolute nicest detail I've ever seen on the inside of the mouth of a figure before, and his paintwork is also incredibly well done. You can see he's used many variations of tones of color in here to give it a lot of realism. You can see the tongue is sculpted nicely, nice texturing to the tongue, and again, the paintwork as well just looks incredible on the inside of the mouth. Also kind of almost has that sort of dirty, kind of almost bloody kind of a look like I would expect to see on the inside of the mouth of a V-Rex. And the jaw, as you can see, works absolutely perfectly. You can close it and open it to pretty much any distance you want, and again, closes perfectly. As you move up here to the eye, you can see the eye is painted with a nice brownish tone, nice black pupil, perfectly placed, perfectly painted, and there is a gloss coat on the eye. There is also a gloss coat for the inside of the mouth, which is something I don't think I mentioned just a moment ago. But as you lead up here to the top of the head, you can again see that we have that kind of armored sort of a look that you do see on the V-Rex. He's done a great job of highlighting all of the detail with some nice dry brushing up here on the top of the head. And you can see that through pretty much every area of the figure. You can see all sorts of variation of color. He's done a great job of applying the paint in a really nice naturalistic way. And you can see variations of kind of like grays and like very dark blues, as you have like darker tones up here that transition very smoothly to lighter tones as you get closer to the jawline, and same kind of an appearance there to the lower jaw. Incredible looking paintwork as well as an incredible sculpt. As you move here along the back of the neck, you again see that very armored sort of a look like you see on the back of the V-Rex. And then as you lead down here to the side of the neck, you see that kind of classic sort of scaling, that classic kind of skin texture you see associated with V-Rex in the Peter Jackson King Kong film, and he's captured that very nicely as well. And again, as we move through, you can see all sorts of variation of color, and he's also added in some nice lighter tones, like whitish tones, underneath a lot of the areas of the skin texture to make it pop really nicely. As you lead down, you can see a pretty smooth transition to the lighter tone here of the underside of the throat. You can also see variations of color down here as you have almost like brownish tones and then whitish tones and stuff like that. Really, really nice looking paintwork. And then you can see the throat itself here of the V-Rex on the underside. And as you move down, you have quite a few areas of articulation. You've got a spot here at the back of the head, a spot here in the neck, a spot here in the neck, and then a spot at the base of the neck. And that allows you to to, move the neck of the V-Rex very nicely, pretty much anywhere you would like. You can position it to go all over the place, create all sorts of different diorama possibilities, and then of course stop motion. You can do all kinds of stop motion as far as these figures go. But as you move down to the shoulder area, you have more of those very large scoop-like scales. As you lead down, they do start to taper away a little bit. As you lead into the stomach region of the V-Rex, you can see how nice the actual skin texture looks. It looks phenomenal, absolutely incredible looking skin texture, and his print quality is really nice, like super, super high quality, super vibrant, and on top of that, the actual resin that he uses is also extremely high quality. I can honestly tell you, just feeling here, probably one of the highest quality 3D sculpts that I've ever felt in my life. Super, super impressive as far as that goes. As you lead down into the arms, you can see the muscle definition there in the arms as well, and then as you lead down into the fingers, we've got the correct amount of digits here on the hand. Even though it is technically a T-Rex, they do have 3 fingers. You can see some scoots down the fingers, and we do also have nails sculpted out there. They look genuinely sharp, nicely painted as well. My camera doesn't really want to focus on it too well, but as you lead down, you have articulation right here in the arm. You also have articulation in the elbow, above and below the elbow, so you've got 2 more areas of articulation right there, and articulation in the wrist, and that allows you the potential to give your arm, again, any pose you would like. Absolutely any position is possible when it comes to that arm. As you lead back here into the stomach region, again, you can see all sorts of variation of color like we were just mentioning. You can see a few skin wrinkles here in the lower part of the stomach. You also have another area of articulation here in the midsection, so you can go up, down, left, right, all over the place to articulate your V-Rex in the midsection as well. As you move along the back, you can again see all those kind of very large scoots and stuff here, that very armored sort of an appearance to the back of the V-Rex. Again, he's really nicely dry brushed a lot of this out with some lighter tones, which highlights that detail perfectly. As you move down here into the leg, you reach the thigh area. You can see again the skin texture is incredible. Like, everybody gets so excited for the Artic Figures releases because of all of the articulation, but I don't feel like people praise the actual fine detail of his sculpts near as much as they praise the amount of articulation. And honestly, his fine detail is untouchable. Like, it really is some of the absolute most incredible sculpt and detail I've ever seen. So professional, so high quality, and so much detail on them. It's insane to me how good the sculpts are, but how quickly Artic Figures works at times. Like, he's said it to me in the past, when he gets motivated, he really does get a lot done in one sitting, and you can see again for how quickly he sculpts these out at times. Like, the detail is out of this world. But as you move down the course of the thigh, you can also, again, see the muscle definition, but you can see like some scoots here running down the front of the thigh of the V-Rex. Again, we have all sorts of variations of darker and lighter shades of color, as well as some more of that light tone kind of creeping through some of the scales, and also lightening here as we get toward the back of the thigh. And you do have articulation, of course, in the hip region, but then as you move down here into the knee, you have articulation above and below the knee, so you've got even more articulation there. You can see some nice skin wrinkles there in the joint of the knee. You also have some scoots moving down the front of the shin. They are painted out with a brownish tone. We've got the calf muscle nicely displayed right there, and then as you continue to move down into the foot, you've got some scoots moving down the front of the foot, and then we have some really nicely sculpted toes, nicely sculpted nails, and you can even see again when it comes to the actual fine detail of the nails, they as well have some really nice sculpt to them, nice like cracks and crevices, adding elements of realism to it. And then as you lead down, you also have articulation right here, as well as down here at the bottom of the foot. But it doesn't end there, because you actually have articulated toes as well. You can see the toes articulate. Even this one is really, really articulated over there. So, unreasonable amounts of articulation. And yes, we do have dew claws over there. And you can again see that we have variations of grays and browns and all sorts of color here as you move down the foot of our V-Rex. And then as we lead up here, again, into the side of the dinosaur, leading back from the thigh toward the tail, you can see more skin wrinkles, more incredible skin texture. I think, especially down here on the underside, he's done a great job of really highlighting the detail where he has, like, the lighter tone, but allows that kind of darker gray to creep through all of the different cracks and crevices of the skin texture. But as we lead out into the tail, you can see more of that armored look here up above on the top of the dinosaur running along the spinal column. You can see kind of like a row of scoots moving down here along the side of the tail. And again, we have lots of variation of color leading out as we have a lot of those lighter tones creeping through the skin texture here, the darker tones of the tail. And again, all sorts of variation of color here running along the underside. And when it comes to articulation, this is the one area where we absolutely go insane with articulation because there is a ton of it as you move out. You can see we've got 1 joint, 2 joints, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 areas of articulation as you move out the length of the tail, so you can articulate that tail pretty much anywhere you would like. You can see you can get all sorts of displays, all sorts of poses and everything for the tail of the V-Rex. You know, pretty much put that tail anywhere you would like. And as you lead out, you of course see the tail decreasing in size. You've got all of that kind of armored sort of a look on the top. Again, that sort of scoot-like appearance here on the side. And then as you lead out toward the tip of the tail, you even have that tip of the tail that is exactly how the V-Rex looks, that almost kind of a slight arrowhead kind of a look is the way I usually term it. But here on the underside, you can again see the detailing looks great. You have all sorts of really nice looking skin texture as you move along. The detailing of a Artic Figures release is honestly unbelievable. Really the type of thing you need to see in person to truly appreciate how impressive it is. And then, of course, if you look here at the opposing side, you're not really going to see too much difference because, of course, it's an articulated figure. It's up to you to kind of display it. So sculpt-wise, it's going to look pretty similar over here. And you can see that as you move through the course of the figure. I think he absolutely nailed pretty much every aspect of this figure, whether it's the sculpt, the paint, the articulation. Everything looks great on this V-Rex, and I could not possibly be happier to finally have this now here in my collection to not only take a look at with you guys, but of course just generally to add to my collection, as I have quite the Artic Figures collection now, and I've been loving each and every release, and this V-Rex might be their best yet. Now, as far as a size goes, that of course depends on where you position it, because height-wise, length-wise is not going to make a difference, but height-wise, that's up to you. I can't really move it in every single position to get a height. So we'll just keep it at this position because I feel like it's a fairly comfortable, naturalistic position for a V-Rex. Lengthwise, you are looking at, from the snout to the tail, about 14.5 inches or around 37 centimeters, maybe about 36.5, closing in on 37. And then for a height to the top of the head, just shy of about 4.5 inches or around a little over 11 centimeters, approaching 11.5. And then to the tip of the tail, about 4.75 inches or around 12 centimeters. And again, the height is really dependent on where you position your figure because, again, it articulates, so there's no real set position for it. It's wherever you want to put it. But for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Artic Figures V-Rex. And you can see that it sports a pretty good size, definitely very similar in size to Mr. Papo Rex when you look at the size of the head sculpts in comparison to each other. Obviously very different as far as the positioning goes, making the V-Rex look way bigger, which in general I think the body is a bit bigger, but they are similar-ish in scale overall. And I love to give you guys the randoms as far as comparisons go, as we have the Collect Day Deluxe Dimetrodon, the Safari LTDU Tyrannus, and Schleich Diabloceratops here next to the V-Rex, just to kind of iron out one comparison here with 3 different figures. And then for one more comparison with some pretty common figures, we have the Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus here next to the V-Rex. Obviously, much larger is the V-Rex, but 2 figures that I feel like are potentially something that a lot of people that watch my channel might have. Now, when it comes to a comparison next to a more recent release of a V-Rex model, we have the Nanmu Soul of the Dragon V-Rex next to the Artic Figures version, and obviously there's a huge size difference between these two, but there's also a huge difference as far as this type, as far as the style, I should say, of figure goes. Like, obviously, one is a model, like a statue, one is a super articulated figure. So very different as far as the style goes, but you can definitely see that the Artic Figures version is much more reasonably sized compared to the Nanmu release. And then for anyone that might have the older Nanmu V-Rex, you can see these ones are pretty similar, but obviously the Nanmu version's a little bit larger, but they're not too far off as far as the size goes, definitely closer than the Soul of the Dragon version of the V-Rex, that's for sure. But for another comparison, we've got the Rebor V-Rex, and yet again the Rebor version's a little bit larger than we see with the Artic Figures version, but just like with every single one of the V-Rex we've shown off, there is definitely a common trend, as a lot of the V-Rex we've seen are all kind of model-like versions or statue-like versions, whereas the Artic Figures version is our very first really good quality version of an articulated V-Rex. We did have kind of articulated V-Rex when you look back to the Playmates toy line for the figures from the movie, but they were nowhere near the quality of the Artic Figures version and nowhere near the amount of articulation. And even though I do have the Playmates articulated, kind of semi-articulated V-Rex, I don't know where I have it exactly. I tried looking for it, can't seem to locate any of them, to be honest. But I do have the Playmates version of the Kong here, and you can see just generally the difference in quality between the Playmates Kong and our amazing V-Rex from Artic Figures. But obviously, you can also see these are not to scale with each other, and that is because Artic Figures actually created this to kind of match up in scale to the SH Monster Arts version of Kong. Now, I don't have the pleasure of owning the SH Monster Arts Kong as far as like one of the older releases, but just because I knew this V-Rex was going to be arriving here to my house very soon, I went out and purchased the Godzilla vs. Kong version of the Monster Arts Kong. So there we've got the Godzilla vs. Kong version of the Monster Arts Kong next to our Artic Figures V-Rex, showing you that they definitely size up a whole lot better to each other than what we had seen with the Playmates version. So if you do already have an SH Monster Arts version of Kong, you now have the opportunity to own a V-Rex that goes with it really, really nicely. And I'm actually quite impressed with the Kong from Monster Arts. I actually have never purchased or owned an SH Monster Arts figure before. This is my very first one, and I was actually lucky enough to acquire this. I knew my local Target had it, so I actually went to Target a few days ago to purchase one just because I wanted to include it with my V-Rex from Artic Figures, and they were actually on clearance, so I got it for like $30, which is a pretty good deal for that, so definitely really neat. But honestly, again, they look super, super cool together, and if you do have the Monster Arts version, the SH Monster Arts Kong, it's a great companion piece to the Artic Figures V-Rex. So this Artic Figures V-Rex is absolutely phenomenal. Such a gorgeous figure. The sculpt is incredible, as it always is when it comes to Artic Figures, but I feel like each and every time I get a new Artic Figures release into my collection, it's more impressive than the last, and that's really saying something, definitely a testament to how good Artic Figures continues to improve, and again, he's been great since the start. The very first figure I ever owned of Artic Figures was their Mega Raptor, and I was blown away by how beautiful that was, but that continues again to impress just how good he's been getting, again, with each and every figure, from already being incredible with his Mega Raptor to being absolutely out of this world with this V-Rex. The sculpt, again, is insanely well done when it comes to the fine detail. The actual print quality is really, really high quality. Super impressive looking fine detail. Like, it absolutely jumps right off of the sculpt. It looks so good. And on top of that, the resin that he uses is extremely high quality. You can just feel weight to it. You can feel how good, how impressive the actual material he uses is, and that's also something that is really, really good about the Artic Figures line, showing you that, again, you're going to get a really high quality figure if you purchase one of the Artic Figures releases. Of course, you have really nice paintwork for this one. This is a painted V-Rex from Artic Figures. You can purchase the painted or unpainted version. That's really up to you. But the painted version would look like this, and I think he's done a great job on the paintwork, as he always does. I have quite a few painted models, painted figures from Artic Figures, and I'm always blown away with how good his paintwork is, just as impressive as his sculpt work. And I think he's done a great job yet again on the actual paintwork of his V-Rex here, and looks definitely very, very much so to what I recall seeing on the V-Rex itself. On top of that, you have articulation galore, as you always do when it comes to Artic Figures. There is just tons of articulation. It all works perfectly. You have the ability to create stop motion films. You have the ability to just create different dioramas, different visuals for your V-Rex if you're just going to display it. You have unlimited possibilities, honestly, as far as that goes. So the articulation is always one of the biggest selling points of an Artic Figures release, but just in general, the entire product as a whole is a selling point to me, because you get an incredibly beautiful sculpted figure, an incredibly beautiful painted figure, and loads of articulation. They really are the total package. So if you are interested in picking one of these up, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that right now on the Etsy shop of Artic Figures. So make sure you check the link in the description. Go grab one of these V-Rex before they sell out. You don't want to miss it. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.